Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Leigh-Anne LoPinto. I'm a psychologist, breathwork teacher, and I specialize in relationships. Today, I want to share a little bit about the patterns in terms of the people who come to me for support. And we'll be getting into this whole topic of labels and if they're useful or not, as well as some really important things I want to share with you about this path of relationships. So, the people who come to me are typically people who really need to, I mean, quite obviously, heal relationship wounds and are really done with looping in relationship patterns over and over and over again. And so that's kind of the broad category, as you would imagine, of the people who come to me for one-on-one support. And so I wanted to just drill down a little bit more and get specific around the patterns that I see. So I have a lot of people come to me who might fall into the empath category that need to actually develop a spine, learn about boundaries, and really heal their ability to love themselves. So that's like really a descriptor that's maybe 90% of the individuals and the people who come my way fit that category. I also, as you could imagine, get a lot of people who have insecure attachment. And so maybe they're currently anxious attached, avoidant attached, disorganized attached. And these are all labels, right, so far that I've been using that are just simply words to describe patterns of behavior. So I have a lot to say about labels, and I know that some people are kind of fall into one of two camps. Either they get overly fixated on labels and labeling themselves, or they throw the whole system away and maybe are very anti-label diagnoses, etc. In my 15 years of practicing as a psychologist, I was obviously trained to diagnose and did so for years. Then I got to the point in my practice in my career where I really wanted to throw everything into the garbage. And that was an important piece of me being able to step away. And I still to this day have quite a bit to share about my criticisms of the field of psychology. There's been more than one occasion where I've actually very much considered stepping away completely. And if I have time today, I'm going to get into a little bit of that I think is useful for you to know in terms of maybe who is worth your time working with. So I want to talk a little bit about coaching versus maybe some of the mental health professions that have gotten a little bit more training if I have time today. But let's go back to the patterns of people who typically come to me. All of these things are patterns of behavior and labels and ways of being. And all of these patterns that we run, myself included, this is why I do this work, is that all these patterns can be broken. All of them can be broken. The only reason why we have developed these psychological and relational patterns is because of our conditioning, our programming, and our trauma. And all of these things can and should be healed so that we can break these patterns. And so if we break these patterns, where are we going? It's into what I call the new paradigm of relationships. If you want to just throw that language out, it's really that we have this opportunity to finally be cycle breakers to heal these patterns, not just for ourselves, but for everybody around us. And we have children, right? We do it for our children as well. And certainly at this time, many of us know that we are here to be cycle breakers, and this work is no joke. So I always hold that very close to my heart as someone who has walked through the fire multiple times in my life. And everybody that I've described to you, the empath without a spine, the person with insecure attachment, and then I'll add a couple things here, people who are running codependency, as well as I'm just looking at my notes here. Those are really the big ones. And what it comes down to, the thread that all of those have in common is that there's somewhere along the way where we were given the message that our ability to love ourselves got eroded over time. And so the foundation that each and every one of those people that I placed in a category has to do, and of course it's bigger than this, but the foundation has to do with actually returning towards ourselves and loving ourselves. And this goes so much farther than just some of the social media, more superficial content that is right on the one hand, right? If you get these truth bombs about like how it always comes back to us loving ourselves, self-love can sometimes be spoken about in a very watered down, superficial, way. And the real work to do that is very, very deep, very, very deep. And true self-love also opens up the portal to actually have a deep connection to our own divinity, which requires us also opening the spiritual portal and developing a relationship with something higher to us as well. And so that's why for me, what I was shown on the path of relationships is that it's not just a psychological and relational path. This is a deeply spiritual path. And so this is the heart and the soul of the work that I do with people, melding all these things together. And so let's talk about labels for a second. I don't believe that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I know I touched on it a little bit, but I'm not somebody who ever wants anybody to take a label like empath or even like introvert and to be able to be like, this is me and I am this fixed identity for life, right? Where I just need to love and accept myself and that is who I am forever. These are not fixed labels and identities. They are descriptors for patterns of behavior. And so I believe that we are all here as souls who have come into bodies to go through and traverse the human experience so that we can actually learn the lessons that we need to learn over the course of our lifetime. And so that's foundational to my work. If you don't believe that, you don't have to, but I just wanted to share that is a very fundamental orientation that I work with is that we're here to learn lessons. So this is where it gets into this sort of seeming polarity where on the one hand, we're returning back to loving ourselves and unconditional love for ourselves and recognizing our divinity, right? The divine spark inside of us. And there's a bigger agenda that wants to convince us that we are broken, imperfect, small, insert all of the adjectives, right? And so this is a profound return home to loving ourselves. And so that this is the more feminine side of the work where we have to really come into unconditional love for ourselves, right? But then there's this other side. This is the masculine side of the path, which is so, so profound. And I work very deeply with integrating these two energies within ourselves on this path. I'm trying to give you a little taste of how we can do it. We hold ourselves with great love and compassion, right? And we move into unconditional love and recognizing that there's really, on some level, we've been told that we are flawed, broken, imperfect, bad, wrong, etc. And so self-love is a deep, deep path, right? So that's the feminine side. However, there's this other side of it. And I just wanted to address some of the current messaging out there that says that's sort of like in opposition to maybe the inner work or the healing side of things, which is, there's some people that are stepping away and they're kind of like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're absolutely perfect the way that you are. This is an extremely nuanced topic because there is a truth to the fact that we have to balance these two sides. I've been speaking, like the video I made and posted about the upper limit problem really goes into this nuanced conversation around where are we spending our time? Are we always in the descent part of the cycle, finding the next thing wrong with us and doing incessant shadow work? Right? Or do we need to learn how to come up and out? This is the ascent part of the cycle where we can open to more good, more love, and actually just live life for a moment. So for each and every one of us, we have to decide where we've spent more of our time. Some people have spent more of their time sort of up in the ascent part of the cycle, but they bypass. They don't like to actually go down into the shadow work. So we each have to get really honest with ourselves in terms of where we've spent the most of our time. And ultimately, it's about balance. It's about balance. We want to be able to do both. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about humility. Humility is something that is absolutely required on this path. So here's the other side of things. You can say it's the more masculine side of things. Personal responsibility is absolutely key in this work. And so the simplest way I can describe it to you is that as humans, we have this polarity going on where there's this sort of divine self or true self, right? Some people say true self, capital T, capital S. Jung just calls it self with a capital S, which is that is our divine highest expression. But we also have this other part that's so human, so human. And one of my favorite authors, John Bradshaw, has amazing work. It's classic work, but it's also from like the 90s and even the 80s, that is absolutely worth time going back to, especially if what I'm about to say lands for you. Um, I'm trying to think of his book. Oh my gosh, Healing the Shame That Binds You is such a beautiful book that was groundbreaking for me to understand the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. So, John Bradshaw so beautifully reminds us that we are so human, and the human side of us is actually imperfect. It is imperfect. So, comes back to this idea that we incarnate as souls who aren't perfect, right? I believe in soul evolution, which means that we come in as souls and we're here to grow and evolve and learn lessons that we need to on the path towards healing and wholeness, right? And it's a profound spiritual path where we end up over lifetimes moving back towards source, the all, the one, because true wholeness is a soul that has experienced all of the things, all of the flavors, all of the archetypes. So I hope this is landing, right? So this is my fundamental orientation. So this human part actually is imperfect. It is imperfect. And so on this path, we have to hold both of these things that I'm saying to you, unconditional love for ourselves, but also like, oh, wow, I do have something to learn here, right? There are ways that I can improve. Let's take the example of the empath that I just shared with you. This person typically finds themselves in relationships with more narcissistic and even abusive partners. Story of my life, right? Story of my childhood. And this is something where it's a hard pill. And trust me, I've had to swallow it. We have to be able, we have to be able to return towards ourselves, repair anything that eroded our ability to truly love ourselves. Because how do we actually learn how to set boundaries? We learn how to set boundaries by actually feeling worthy of being able to have boundaries in the first place. And so self-love, boundaries, developing a spine, developing more assertive communication, and actually understanding the energetic signature of both the empath and the narcissist, and understanding that each of these is on a polar opposite end of a spectrum, and both in a perfect world need to actually come towards the middle. The empath needs to actually learn how to love herself, how to actually speak boundaries, and how to be more assertive and stop putting people on pedestals and be able to return to herself and sometimes put herself first. The narcissist needs to come this way to develop more empathy, more compassion, and not always put him or herself first all the time. So it's actually a process through relationships, right? In a perfect world, what's happening on the higher level that loves both people, there is an opportunity to move towards integration. And so after working with thousands of people over the past 15 years, I know these patterns through and through. And I know what works. I know what works to actually break the patterns and to be able to completely change your life. And so if you find yourself maybe resonating with some of these terms, like an empath, right, that maybe relationships have been hard for you in some of the ways I described, or maybe you have anxious attachment or avoidant attachment or disorganized. That was me, right? The disorganized. Or if you're running codependency, which let's be honest, 95% of the world and people are, right? We're swimming in codependency programming. This is what I talk about in that 2.5 hour video, the teaching video called The Trap of Codependency and How to Break Free. This is why I do spend time actually on these things that we can put words to. So we don't want to fall into the other side of the camp where we're just throwing all labels in the garbage. We just want to be able to be aware that they are describing human archetypes that are real and that are true. So you can't just throw everything in the garbage, right? That's a little bit of bypassing. But the impulse to do that is coming because people actually do it in a way such that they are getting trapped in the prison of the label. So I hope that you can understand that, like, if we find material on that empath narcissist, dance or tangle, right? Um, and we resonate with some of these labels, it's just an invitation for us to be like, wow, that is totally what I'm doing. And it's not to, go into shame about it. But I'll give you an example of the highest thing that we could do, and that I highly encourage that we try to change our mindset around, is to be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. It's describing a pattern that now I can learn more about myself through this. And we know actually what works. And I promise you, it's a very textbook way of how we can actually work with this stuff. And to take it even one level higher, this is a process of soul evolution through relationships and through being able to look at ourselves with humility, to be able to face our wounds, to be able to see what patterns we are running. This is why you need to be working with someone that can help you spot these subconscious patterns and also knows the remedy or the antidote for these things. So I think I just wanted to come on and share some of the ways in which these conversations are very nuanced, right? I wanted to share the types of people time and time again that come to me, why this work is completely life-changing and transformative if you can find someone who really knows what they're doing, as well as why humility is a key ingredient on this path. There's so much more that I can share, but I'll just start to close by saying that I also see that there's a lot of people who have been, talking some smack about people who have degrees or, maybe people in the mental health profession. And I think it's actually a beautiful thing that we've opened up the field to be able to include coaches that may or may not have any training at all. To be honest with you, I think it needed to open up like that, which is a really beautiful thing, to allow more freedom and to be able to honor certain people's lived embodied experience of going through the thing and then to help other people. That's beautiful. Everything that I teach, talk about, I've lived through all of the things. That's why I pivoted in my work to actually start to specialize in relationships because I went through all of it myself. Go to the podcast and listen to part one and part two of my story if you want to get to know me better, because it'll tell you everything and why, through blood, sweat, and tears, of why I'm so devoted to this work, right? I don't actually have a choice. I never wanted to teach about relationships or like specialize in it because it's fun. Like I actually had to really go through all the things that I help people with. So embodied experience is absolutely critical, but that's just one pillar of it, right? There's this other thing where like my 15 years of experience working with thousands of people and even going back to my university training and something like an internship or an apprenticeship. Wow, I think that's my only concern, is that we might be losing that amount of rigor and even humility to be able to be in that position where you do have to learn from like an elder or somebody who is a mentor, who for an extended period of time is training you and supervising you, is something that don't see. I don't see that level of rigor in the coaching industry. I also personally don't trust someone who calls themselves trauma informed after doing a weekend workshop about trauma, etc. So you have to also compare the level of rigor in the people that you're working with. Trauma and shadow work, very, very complex, delicate topics that we just have to be discerning with who we choose to work with. So it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? And I understand a lot of people have a lot to say about, degrees, going to college. Trust me, I know firsthand about the whole educational system obviously needs to be completely reformed. I've been passionate about this since 2010 and actually worked in the schools for years as a psychologist, helping and working in the system. And I can assure you, the whole thing needs to be revised, but we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I really stand by the fact that I had incredible mentors and even incredible professors back in the day when I went through that training. And there's real usefulness in it. There was also professors and people who weren't great, right? And so it's always kind of a mixed bag. And I also just wanted to say there's some psychologists and mental health people that are amazing and some that aren't great. And there's some coaches that are amazing and some that aren't great, because we're humans, we're all across the board here. So I think I'm going to wrap up, but yeah, I would love to hear from you. If you're not aware, you can always book a free call with me and we can actually go really, really deep. I just had one with somebody just before I jumped on here, and we were able to go super deep in just a short time because I'm able to very intuitively and also with the pattern recognition that I have, I'm able to help people right away, pinpoint exactly where you can get the biggest bang for your buck. And so one-on-ones are open this year, 2026 with me. I'll put all of the links in the description. You can book a free call. You can immediately book a session if you don't need to. And there's tons of free material, like a vast amount of free material that I put out there that I have put a lot of time and energy in. And I give so much. And so I'll also put a link to a page on my website that's called Start Here. And so it really gathers all the foundational materials for you. So I think that's it for today, but please reach out if you have any questions. And I hope this helps.